Hello and good morning, and it is morning for me. It's about 10 to 7 in the morning, but here we go. Let's have a look at the final set of questions, but actually the first one on your mock exam that perhaps you haven't studied yet. But good news, there's a lot in it that you have done. Now, just to go over, this is the first one you're watching. This is really important. If it's any of the others, I've gone through the same. I just want to get it stuck into your head. This exam is set out differently to your in-depth paper, which is your Christianity, your Islam. You're going to get two booklets, okay? One of them is going to contain a set of 6 questions, okay? And then you're going to get a booklet that you're going to put your answers in, and you just answer them in any random order. So the most important thing is, though, you do not answer all 6 sets of questions. So you can see on my screen, you've got one set of questions there. You only answer 4 sets of questions and you answer all of them, okay? You need to answer theme B, which is the one we're going to have a look at today, theme C, theme D and theme E. You do not answer theme A, which is on relationship and families. That's the one that I've put on the screen for you. You would ignore that. You put a big line through it. You turn to the last set of questions. You put a big line through that. You are doing religion and life, okay? Existence of God and revelation, peace and conflict, and religion, crime and punishment. Do not be tempted to answer question A, or questions on A, questions on F. In the GCSE, on average, students who do that drop 2 grades. Don't risk it. You might think you know, but you probably don't to the GCSE standard that we are looking for. So stick with B, C, D, and E. And remember, when you're answering the questions, make sure you say which question you're answering. So you're doing all the 0, 2 points, all the 0, 3, 0, 4, 0, 5, and make sure you have a go at them all, okay? You will know more than you think. Okay, and what I've said with this is, so many of you will probably have a view that matches a Christian view, whether you're a Christian or not. So if you're ever in doubt, just put a Christian would say, and then put your view, only don't say that it's yours. As long, of course, it's not saying, God doesn't exist or evil comes from God, things that obviously a religious person wouldn't say. Okay, let's get on with today's session. So theme B, 0, 2 point questions, religion and life. Now this is everything that's going to be on the mock. Obviously we are going to teach you what is in this unit. It's the last one and you've actually covered most of it already. Most people find this is the one that they really enjoy and find it the easiest, as long as they've learnt those key terms. Okay, so here we go. Christians and Muslims believe that God has created an amazing world. Why? So for Christians in the Bible it says God looked at all that he had made and he said it was very good. And so they believe the world is so beautiful and complex, they can only stand at awe and wonder of the God who created it. My classes, you'll remember I told you a story about when I'd gone out walking with a friend and we'd walked up the top of this I want to say mountain, but it probably wasn't. But anyway, it was a big hill of some sort. And I looked out and took my breath away. It was beautiful. And as a theist, I look at that and I just go, wow, look at this world that God has created. And in that moment, I just had a little bit of a feeling of, there's got to be something greater, something bigger than myself. This can't have come about by chance, awe and wonder. And yet, that theists have different beliefs about not necessarily the origins of the universe. All theists believe that it's come from God or a supreme power or the divine in some way. But for Christians, they've got very different ideas in terms of just how God created it. So you've got your literalists, yeah, who believe in the 7 days of creation. just as the Genesis story teaches us. They would say if you went back in history, you could go and stand there and watch God do it just like it tells you in Genesis. It's a historical event. Adam and Eve are historical people in history. And then, of course, you've got your literalists. Now, literalists often will accept science and religion as something that works together in the vast majority of cases. They believe in scientific theories like the Big Bang, evolution, yeah? They say, well, there's evidence for the Big Bang, the redshift, cosmic background radiation. There's evidence for evolution, fossils, the way in which we understand the way things have adapted and mutated over time. But they would say God is the intelligent mind behind it. They would say the creation story was a myth. It's a story that was created not to lie, but to portray a religious truth. That God is so powerful and almighty that he can create something from nothing. He's the ultimate creator. He is all powerful. So Christians and Muslims both believe that God created the world and put humans in charge. Again, the Genesis, the Bible story says that God turns to humans and says, rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and every living thing that moves. Feel free to paraphrase that and just put, the Bible teaches that God gives humans, tells humans to rule over every creature on the earth. So because of this, Christians believe that one, humans have got dominion. Key word here, dominion. It just means to have rule and authority over something. In my classroom, I have dominion over the students. In this school, Mrs. Moran has got dominion over everything that goes on. In our set of governors have dominion over how the school is kind of ordered and operated. The police have dominion, over the way people behave. Does that make sense? So they've got rule and authority over something. Now, this kind of has got a little bit of different interpretations, no surprise. Some theists think, well, we've got dominion. We can do whatever we want with the earth and the animals because we are in charge. We're not really, we're answerable to God, but God has given us authority and power. And it's a little bit more like dominion. If, religious people then begin to treat things well, if it's positive and helpful in their life, but where it's not, doesn't really matter. Whereas others, and I think most theists would say this is where they sit, although in reality that's debatable. They think, well, we've got dominion, therefore we should take even more care of everything because we are the superior beings in creation. Does that make sense? It's a little bit like having a child and saying, well, it's my child, I can do what I want with them, or saying it's my child, therefore I have a responsibility to make sure I bring this child up properly. So humans have got this duty of stewardship. They should take care of the world, the environment, all living things because of the God-given responsibility, okay? But, so therefore most theists will, even if it's a token gesture, recycle, reduce the waste, reuse things, especially like plastics, as much as possible. Walk instead of using the car or use public transport. Use renewable energy sources rather than burning fossil fuels. Buy fair trade items. Support conservation projects like zoos and protecting the rainforests from deforestation. So like as the head of RS, I donate money every year to plant trees. Actually in Kenya of all places, because of all the amount of recycling all the amount of paper that we use in school, because I'm trying to put back even more so what we use. I own a part of the rainforest so that people can't knock it down. It's what I do as a Christian. Unfortunately, I wish I said I did more than that, but I probably don't, which is why I said, some theists believe, we can do what we want. I don't think we can do, but unfortunately, I don't think our lifestyles, for the most part, are actually that effective in helping the environment. But that's a whole different thing. So theists also differ on the way we use animals as well. You know, theists believe that animals are part of God's creation. We've all come from the same source. We've all come from God. But again, there's different beliefs on how we should treat animals, and it's the same thinking of how we should treat the environment. And this has come from this idea that humans are made in God's image. You know, it says, let us make man in our own image, and male and female, he created them. And so there's this idea that humans have a soul. We are created differently from the rest of creation. God creates Adam, and it says God breathes into Adam the breath of life, or the breath of God, which is another term for the Holy Spirit. Whereas animals, you know, God said, let there be animals, let there be fish. God uses his spoken word. And so this has developed this idea that animals are inferior to humans. Again, we've got dominion over animals. We can do what we want for them. We're their rulers, so we can experiment on them. We can test on them. We can use them for sports and pets. We can eat them. We can use parts of their bodies for clothing and destroy their habitats if we need to. There we go. If we need to make room for roads, housing, airports and things like that. There we go. That's what some people will believe. And even if they don't believe it, perhaps we're not doing a good enough job to speak out about it and be those courageous advocates. Now, there are theists, though, that would say, many Muslims, for example, would say that the Quran would agree with the Quran that says it only permits the use of animals for necessary purposes. So food is absolutely to eat animals in, or at least some animals in the Quran is absolutely fine as long as they're killed appropriately to halal standards. You know, there are many Muslims and Christians that would say, well, actually, animals are really important for medical experimentation. You know, animals are okay to be used for pets as long as we're kind and not cruel. Certainly in Islam, there is a big understanding that animals should never be used for entertainment and sport and luxury clothes items. You know, we don't need lizard handbags or crocodile shoes and things like that. We don't need to be putting animals in rings where they're fighting each other and brutalizing each other. So some theists believe we shouldn't eat animals at all. We can survive without eating meat, and these theists might become vegan or vegetarian as a result. Don't particularly see that in Islam or Christianity. But there are Muslims and there are Christians who are vegetarian and vegan because they believe all animals come from the same source, so we shouldn't be treating them like that. Many Christians also say we shouldn't inflict pain on animals for just any reason. Experimenting should only be for necessary procedures. Although some would completely disagree with that as well and argue, well, you know, human DNA really is nothing like, or physiology anyway, is nothing like animals, so therefore testing on them is pointless. And you know, they might speak out about that and live their life in a way that represents that by not buying any product that's been tested on an animal, not eating anything, not wearing clothing that's made from leather or anything like that. Okay, so last one, and I think you're probably going to be amazing at this one because we've covered it in Christianity and Islam, is this idea that, and a little bit in Existence of God and Revelation, life is not the end. There is an afterlife, and this is because the holy books speak of an afterlife. A holy book is general revelation. This is God revealing himself. You know, the Quran, God's word, it talks about the belief in Akhirah, the afterlife. It's one of the 6 articles of faith in Sunni Islam, and it's the belief of all Muslims. The Quran teaches about Jannah and Jahannam, you know, and this is the word of God, so it can be trusted. You know, the belief in heaven and in Christianity as an eternal reward and hell as an eternal punishment is taught in the parable of the sheep and the goats. That's the one where the king comes and he separates the people on almost like on Judgment Day into what he calls the sheep and the goats, and the sheep go to heaven because they've helped people who can't help themselves. You know, they've fed the poor, they've given them clean water, you know, they've helped those in poverty. Whereas the goats are sent to their eternal punishment because they didn't do those things. And so you've got this concept of an afterlife running right the way through, because of course for Muslims life is a test to see if they're good enough for paradise. You know, for Christians, life is about finding how to be saved and how to get that salvation, which they believe comes through forgiveness and Jesus' atoning death, but then living out the teachings of Jesus, which of course can be summed up as love one another as I have loved you, words that Jesus spoke at the Last Supper. But then you've also got things like Ian McCormick, the jellyfish man, the guy who got stung multiple times by box jellyfish. He had all kinds of special revelation, visions, hearing voices, and then allegedly he dies, meets God in the afterlife. He then gives him the option to come back. And he chooses to, and this experience has completely changed his life. He went from being somebody who didn't believe in God, you know, his lifestyle was very hedonistic, all about pleasure. And then he comes back and he's convinced that God exists, and he changes his life around. You know, why would he do that for something that one wasn't true and that he was lying about? You certainly wouldn't do that kind of thing for attention. You're more likely to be laughed at. You know, the idea of an afterlife also gives meaning and purpose to life. It explains why there's evil and purpose in the world if life is a test, and pushes humans to live good, moral lives. So having an afterlife makes sense of the world as we've got today. You know, some people claim to have seen ghosts. I know when I ask that question in class, so many hands go up. You know, there are people who believe that they can contact the dead. Are these people really making it up? Who knows? You know, some people, Hindus and Buddhists believe in reincarnation because, you know, there are stories of people who remember their past lives and they can recall, you know, quite particular detail from previous lives. You know, how could that happen if it wasn't real? You know, you just need to put it on YouTube. We've started looking at it in year 9, I think it is. This little boy who recalls being a fighter pilot, knows everything about planes and areas, knew where he went crashed in the war, and he was so vivid about what he was telling his parents. His parents looked it up, and it was like, oh my goodness, we think this is real. So there we go. Is this evidence that there's an afterlife? Who knows? Now I'm getting creeped out and wondering if there's somebody behind me. I'm not looking in the camera to check. Okay, however, there might not be an afterlife. You know, there's no concrete evidence. Scientific evidence suggests that perhaps that there isn't one. You know, no one in our lifetime has actually come back from the dead in terms of being dead a long time, rather than a near-death experience where perhaps we've just not got that technology to understand. And so we've got nothing to go on. You know, Christians might say, "Whoa, hang on a minute, Jesus came back from the dead. You know, he resurrected." And as much as I believe that, we can't really believe the Christian account because there's no concrete evidence for it. Well, I can believe the Christian account, but there isn't any concrete evidence for it. There is an element of faith there. The disciples could have been mistaken. The Romans might have taken his body. The disciples might have taken his body. You know, so there's just no explanation there as to whether that actually happened or not. So for some people, that's not good enough to prove that there's an afterlife. You know, people who have claimed to have seen ghosts contact the dead, they could be lying. They could just be mistaken. Our brains are incredible. You know, if we see something or perceive something we don't understand, you know, our brain tries to make sense of it. I don't know about you, but, you know, whenever I see patterns or even, you know, like coys and things like that, my body seems, my eyes seem to be able to make out faces. Do you know what I mean? And they're not. You know, is it just that we see something, we don't know what it is, our brains try and understand it? and we try and put something on it that isn't actually there. You know, the candle blows out, and it could just been that there was a weird draft in the room at that time that you didn't kind of feel, rather than it being some sort of spirit or somebody coming to revisit you. The other thing as well is, this argument we get meaning and purpose from our lives because of the afterlife. But actually, we can get meaning and purpose from our lives just by living this life to the full and having our own values about life, about the way we should live and what we want to get out of this life. Because as far as some people think this is the only life we've got. Believing in what they would say is an imaginary afterlife is a waste of time. We need to live life now, not worry what will happen in the future when we really just don't know. And you could argue as well, the afterlife is just made up to comfort people, after they've lost a loved one. Perhaps it's just a coping mechanism. We feel comforted by the fact that we say, well, they've probably gone to a better place, where they're going, they've gone to be with such and such a body who died a long time ago. And it gives us comfort, and it kind of helps us to not fear death in the same way. So perhaps that belief in the afterlife is just a coping mechanism. So get a question like this, contrasting beliefs. In your answer, you must refer to the main religious tradition of Great Britain today. There's two things I want to flag up here. Contrasting, you do different, opposite where you can. Sometimes you can't do opposite because it just doesn't sit right. There was a question a while ago about explain two contrasting actions that a Muslim will perform on the Hajj. Well, they all do the same thing. You couldn't put something opposite there, but you could put this circle the Kaaba, this is on Mount Arafat. They are contrasting because they're different, okay? But if you can do opposite, because you're onto a safe number there. So two contrasting beliefs about the use of animals for food. Now, the other thing is the main religious tradition in Great Britain today. We often think of traditions as something that you do. It's like kind of a ritual, like, at Lent you might give something up, or my kill me for telling you this on YouTube, but my one of my family members always puts on his lucky underpants when England's playing, because it's just a tradition of what he does, mixed in with a little bit of superstition. But religious tradition can also mean a religion or groups within a religion. So when it asks you to refer to the main religious tradition of Great Britain, it means give a Christian viewpoint, okay? Give a Christian viewpoint. So the first thing on this I want you to do is a Christian belief or one Christian reason or whatever. Always start with that. Get it out the way, okay? Now you'll notice in this question it doesn't say religious beliefs. So make sure you've clocked that, okay? If it says religious, you don't refer to atheism or humanism. But this one actually just says beliefs, okay? And in the themes paper, you can talk about religious views, non-religious views, if it invites you to do so. And this just says beliefs. So this is what I've put. A Christian belief about the use of animals for food is that it's acceptable, brilliant, but not worth a mark. Okay, this is because the Bible teaches God made humans in his image. Okay, now I've got a quote there, I've referenced it, but I've still not picked up any marks because I've not answered the question. So many Christians believe humans had a soul where animals do not. Okay, still not picked up a mark because I've not linked it to food. Here we go. This means that animals can be used for food as they are different from humans. Now, that is a very, very long explanation, but I had to build up my points in order for my explanation to make sense in answering the question, which is why my development on this that I've done in blue, because I couldn't use pink, I normally use pink, didn't stand out on this paper. So it says animals are inferior to humans and we have dominion over them. That's my third point in that. So a contrasting belief, notice I'm using the words from the question, is that because humans can survive without eating meat, it's cruel to use or kill animals for food as it's unnecessary. Now, I always think where you can, give a religious viewpoint because it's an RS exam. So some Christians choose to be vegetarian or vegan because they believe that we have a God-given responsibility to take care of animals, not abuse our power over them. 5 marks. Okay, so hopefully that's a really, really helpful response. I cannot emphasize enough, use the frameworks. Okay, use the frameworks. We put the frameworks together because if you don't, you might miss marks that you should get, but you've just not written it clearly. So think with your 12 markers, make sure you know what the question is inferring, it's asking. I always say to my classes, write the statement as a question. Write the statement as a question. You know, so if the statement was animals should never be used for food, evaluate this statement. You know, really the question is asking, should animals ever be used for food? Think of your 12 marker like 2 5 markers, or a 5 marker and a 4 marker. Okay, give you know, you want 2 explain points, well developed, get a quote in there if you can do. And then once you've done that, check you've got your religious, you've got your arguments for, your arguments against, check you've got your religious content in, because sometimes with a question like that, you know, animals shouldn't be used for food, you could answer that without giving a religious answer. So, you know, just, and if you haven't, then quickly put in a paragraph. Some Christians might not agree with this because, however, some Christians would, yeah. Then what you want to do is, having looked at different viewpoints, I think the strongest viewpoint is this because. So what you're trying to do there is not repeat what you've put in your exam, but justify why it's the strongest answer, and then just to nail those massive marks. You know, I understand why people say, but I think this is the weaker argument because, and always leave on kind of your top trump, you know, this is why I'm right. Really, really hope that helps. Good luck.